Hello and welcome to the Conscious Creators Vodcast, where we have extraordinary discussions to empower you to create the story of your life. Each week, you will discover how to overcome painful patterns of mental, emotional, and physical distress, how to drop the mask of your public persona, and revolutionary steps of what you can do to awaken your true health and potential. You have the power to create a new story of your life starting right now. So, what's your story? As social beings, we humans love to share stories. It's inherent in our cultures and histories, whether we're sitting around a campfire with friends or family, or immersing ourselves in someone else's story via the mediums of television, film, and theatre. Yet you might not realise that your own personal story has been constructed by your social interactions and the meanings you assign to them at the time. Painful stories in particular tend to get stored in our psychological backpack, and we retell them over and over again until they become part of your core identity. But what would your life look like if you realised that you had the power to shape a new story of your life? Welcome to our show. I'm Victoria, and today Pete and I will deconstruct the stories we've carried in our backpacks and share insights into how you can change your story if you don't like the way your current one is playing out. Hi there, Pete.
Hi, Victoria. Hi, listeners. Hi, audience. Good to be back again.
So we've been telling stories for so long that we actually become them, and we accept this identity as a way of life. And this is heavily influenced by our familial, our cultural, and societal constructs. And they shape the expectations of what we have for what is possible for us. So, Pete, would you like to kick off with a story of your own?
Yes, I would actually. I was thinking about this as you were kind of doing the intro there, and I think one story that I've got in particular is to do with, I guess, a family situation. And I'm not sure if I mentioned to you or the audience before, but when I was very, very little, roughly 11 months old, my father passed away, and under odd circumstances. Anyway, long story short, even though I didn't consciously know him, I can't consciously remember him, clearly there's a bond that got broken, and a high degree of emotional pain that I suffered as a young child. And so it then, it kind of dawned on me that the story that I bought into was that I need to close myself down in order to protect myself and ensure that I don't get hurt by being vulnerable and then have somebody potentially leave me. So when I look back and think about how I was, particularly, round about the age of, a young teenager, it became quite clear that the way I was quite guarded. I used to, play my hands close to my chest, as they say. And I was always very, very aloof, I guess is the way to describe me. And so I was more about asking others about themselves and finding out about other people rather than allowing myself to be opened up and be exposed, because potentially I could start to to like somebody, form a friendship or whatever, and then something happens, we fell out, and then they left, and that'd be a reinforcement of this fear of loss. So yeah, I mean that's definitely a story that I think had been playing out, and also I was very, very kind of anti-conflict. And again, that is a case of I didn't want to not be liked by somebody in the event that, if we had a friendship, for example, that they would then not like me and they would leave. So this whole recurring pattern of fear of loss, fear of loss, fear of loss played out in many, many instances. So that's definitely something that I know was there it's something that has dissipated to quite a large extent. Part of it due to me consciously making an effort to change it, but also because of the passage of time as well. Time heals all wounds, and so the combination of those two has definitely made that story subside. But I think that was a very, very intense story that was playing throughout my life, which began when I was roughly 1 year old. So that's one I wanted to share. Now, of course, there are other stories than that kind of come up from time to time. I guess another one funny enough, it's also linked to my dad, but this time my stepdad. Okay. And so that would be a cultural story. So my real father was from Trinidad in the West Indies. My stepfather was from Jamaica, and but both had come over here, during the 50s for during the Windrush period. Anyway, long story short, my stepdad, from when I can remember, really, was always saying to me that, as a young black boy growing up in the UK, and bearing in mind this was like the 70s, right? So I'm kind of giving away my age there, but you're going to find that you've got to work twice as hard as everybody else. You've got to be twice as good as everybody else, just to kind of just to stand still. So I would take that on board, and like the sponge that I was, because I was young. However, I guess when I got to the age where I could start to think for myself, which is probably around about 8 or 9, there was a part within me that was like, no, I'm not buying into this story at all. Now, I could understand even at that young age as to why my stepdad was saying that, because of what he'd been through during the 50s and stuff. But I knew that I was not inferior to other people. I was the same as other people. Yeah, I may look different, but my intrinsic value was no less than any other man or woman on the planet. And so I kind of like pushed back against that thought process, and as a result of that, whilst clearly there has been situations where I've been on the other end of people and unfavorable thought processes and unfavorable words and language towards me and behaviors, that's always going to be part of life, right? Wherever you've got different cultures mixing, you're going to get this type of challenge. But that aside, that's just part of life as far as I'm concerned. I've never bought into that story whereby I'm only half as good as somebody else, therefore I've got to work twice as hard. And ultimately here I am today, a testament to not buying into that, because I'm here with you, running their own business. Right? So I understood where my dad, well, my stepfather was coming from. I get it. Different backgrounds. He had a much harder time than I did, but there was something within me that just said, nope, I'm not having that. And so that was swatted away and kicked to the curb. So 2 stories there that I'm happy to share. One from both from the family background, but one in terms of an emotional outcome, and 2 in terms of like a perception based on culture. So I hope that gives you some insight into my own personal stories there.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Pete, and quite very personal stories as well. And I think it's the fact that you chose, whether you were consciously aware of it or not, but you chose that you weren't going to play out the same story that had been passed down the generations. And I mean, I can relate to that in a different way, and it's something that I think I touched on in episode 1, about the women in my family. And I was brought up in an environment which kind of reinforced the limitations of the role of women in the family. And so either you could go to work, but you probably wouldn't aspire to being anything other than a secretary, or you would be a stay-at-home housewife. And for me, I wanted something more than that. And I think the other thing is that most people, most of my relatives on both sides of my family, their relationships broke down and they ended in divorce. So it kind of set up a set up a belief that I was powerless to have something different from that, and that I was unworthy of having both like a satisfying career and a happy, healthy relationship. And then this was kind of reinforced when I was 15 by the careers advisor, who, and I think it was somebody that had come in externally. So she didn't, as far as I know, she didn't know anything really about me. And she told me that I could go and work in a bank. And for like a young creative, that was just really soul destroying for me.
So it was as if the continuation of that story had happened. So you kind of had this pigeonholing situation going on inside the house, and then when you've left the house and you're at school and you're getting advice in terms of what to be in the world, you're getting the same advice. So the story gets perpetuated, right?
Yeah. And I think, you touched on culture as well. And I think, if you look at the culture that we grow up in here in Britain, and of course other countries around the world, that, from a very young age, we're always taught to sort of get permission from somebody outside of ourselves. So, when we're very young, we're asking our parents if we can do certain things. Then, as you said, you go to school and you have to ask the same permissions. And as we get older, there's seemingly someone else that we need to get permission from. So I think that kind of just perpetuates the belief system, right?
No, for sure. It's definitely about being aware of the impact of the company of those that we keep, be it at a societal level or even at a kind of personal social level. It's,
Yeah, you're right, because we might miss the fact that actually the people we keep company with do play a huge role in keeping that story alive. We get people that are not really hearing your story, and they might be like, well, it's always been like that, or it's just this, is what it is. I hear that a lot. Just get over it. Heard that before. And oftentimes, and I think I could be guilty of this as well, is that someone else will tell a story and then we reinforce it by saying, oh yeah, I remember when that happened to me, and kind of just keeping that story alive.
Well, yeah, that is a good one to talk about, because as you're saying that, I think about a particular story of mine that occurred, or rather was a friend of mine at the time. Well, I'll put that in inverted commas. I think was trying to keep the story that I was going through in place, when actually what they shouldn't have done is done that at all. So I think sometimes we need to look at the friends that we have, and also families sometimes as well, and discern whether what they are doing and saying and how they're acting is there for our best interests, and they're inadvertently keeping us or helping us to keep the story going. What they want is the best for us, but they don't realize that through what they're saying, such as examples that you just gave, that they're keeping it going. And that can be, you can forgive people for that. But
well, very unconscious, isn't it? But they're playing out the patterns that they've, learned in their upbringing. And
yeah, exactly. And and we reciprocate, right? We sometimes do the same thing, right, inadvertently. But there are also, I guess the term I would give is operators, is one of my favorite terms, where people know, again, friends of yours, quote unquote, know that if they say a certain thing, what it will do is keep you where you are. And actually, the reason for that quite often is so that they don't lose you as a friend, or they, maintain perhaps, a higher social status than you have, or, a higher commercial status or whatever than you have. And so, sometimes the actions of the friends and family that we have are not honourable, deliberately so. So I think it's really important to be able to discern where people are coming from in terms of, the quote unquote the support that they give you.
Well, I think I read somewhere about, people, they want to see you do well, but they don't want you to do better than them. It's just
that's right.
Part of a human condition.
Yeah.
But, to add to what you just said there, Pete, is that, it's important to realise that, we're all playing a role in the stories of, not in only our story, the main role in our story, but we're also playing a role in the stories of other people around us, and vice versa. So, your story is never, in fact, the whole story. And I wonder if one of the reasons that many of us get stuck in the current story is because when you start to shape a new story for your life, for yourself, then it means your core identity will change. Everything you've identified with up until that point will start to shift. And it might also mean that some of the people in your life will, disappear from your life. They don't fit with that new you that you're creating. And of course, that can feel really quite scary.
Yeah, exactly. Never a truer word said. And actually, that's a really good segue into another element of the story that we've got, to share with the audience, and that is, the kind of what's the story behind us failing to succeed. What's going on there, because I think this is a story that's shared by nearly everybody who's listening to this or watching this, at some stage or another. There have been goals that we've set ourselves, that you set yourself, and in your mind, you're clear and you're set on getting that goal, making it happen. But things don't go according to plan. And when you kind of think about it, I think it kind of boils down to three key things. The reason why we don't get to where we want to get to is because we have a fear of failure, we have a fear of success. Also, it's not uncommon for there to be a situation where we don't feel good enough, right? So whatever way you throw the dice, out of each of any of those three options, the bottom line is that we don't end up getting what we want. So what we need to start to do is begin to really challenge our belief systems, our limited way of thinking, so that we can begin to break down these self-destructive patterns and basically rebuild ourselves up and rebuild a story in a new way. So we can either do that simply by, for example, kind of looking back in our experiences where we've found stuff that we've done or ways that we've behaved that run contrary to what we're seeing now.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, that's quite a straightforward way of doing things. Or there perhaps might be like a more complicated set of approaches that people need to take. But either way, whether it's simple or complicated, it's all about challenging these ingrained beliefs so that we break them down and build them up into something new and better.
Yeah, no, spot on, Pete. And if we're trying to create a new story of our life, then there is going to be a bit of a struggle, because we have to let go of the one that's been playing out for so long. And it makes me think of the story of the butterfly. It has to emerge from this chrysalis and struggle to get out. And I think it's a fact that if you try and help the butterfly get out before it's ready, then it won't have the wings yet to fly. So the reward of doing this work is that it's going to be life-changing, but you might have to go through a little bit of struggle and pain to shift out of that old story into the new story that you want to construct. And then as we do start to reinvent ourselves, then what will happen is that you'll start attracting the right people that will support the new story that you are creating, the new version of yourself. Start to see those shifts happen over time.
Yeah, totally. Because you can't have the same factors remain in place if you're going to have a different outcome. It's like two things can't occupy the same space. So, I'm not sure what the law would be. Maybe the law of common sense, but literally, you can't have a different outcome if things are staying the same. So something's got to move, something's got to change, something's got to give. And I think it goes back to what we were saying. I think it was maybe 1 or 2 episodes ago about two sides of the same coin. Transformation on one side of it has what was, and on the other side has what will be. But you can only ever have one of the faces showing at any one time. You can't have both. But to get to the other, one's got to change. So
so I think you're right. We said it in a previous episode that to gain, you have to lose something, and then sometimes it's losing part of our identity that we've carried around with for so long,
which no longer serves us. So yeah, there you go. Fantastic.
Awesome. All right, Pete. Well, thank you for joining me again. I think it was another deep topic, and it will get people thinking. So I'll just recap what we did discuss today. And that is that we discovered that our stories are heavily influenced by our family, by our culture, and our societal constructs. And we also looked at how our expectations of what is possible for us shape what we tend to experience. And then Pete and I also shared insights into how we can begin to deconstruct and destory our story if we don't like the one that we're currently in. And so if you're ready to start creating a new story of your life, grab a complimentary session by contacting us at www.wearetac.com and discuss a coaching program just for you. And you can also join this discussion by submitting any comments or questions to our Facebook page, which is the Academy of Conscious Creators. And we will answer those questions in our weekly short answer session, which is each Wednesday at 7 p.m. And do join us again next Wednesday at 8 o'clock, where we will take a deeper dive into how you can escape from failure and be open to possibility. So until then, what's your story? Thank you, Pete.
Cheers, Victoria. Cheers, Linus. See you later. Bye-bye.